how has this never been written before? Like, why aren't there a series of stories from the 40s, 50s, or 60s about all the aliens that arrived, said one religion's true, or this alien religion's true, or no religion's true?
What does it mean to be original then? How when people say that, what do they mean?
What is your rebuke of our review? You have notes.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Tutor Ramble episode. I'm one of your hosts, Austin.
I'm your other host, Richard.
We are interviewing and having a conversation today with M.R. Leonard, the author of Pilgrims. We're not going to be spoiling his book till we'll give you spoiler warnings, but this is a highly recommended book that we reviewed earlier on our channel, and we're very excited to talk with M.R. Leonard. Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the channel.
Rich and Austin, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We want to dive into a lot of things because your book Pilgrims, the book pitch of this is there are Catholic aliens invading Earth, and it's such a great hook, and I could see why it's gotten great success. I know in the first 6 months of you releasing the book, it had over 10,000 sales already, which is a high accomplishment for a debut novel.
Yes, absolutely. And so my background prior to writing was from business. So while I won't claim to be a good book marketing author, or an expert in that domain, I just had that in the back of my mind. You can make the best product in the world, but if people can't find it, they're not going to. And so I had the premise. That's obviously the idea for the story was foremost, but it was very important for me to be able to boil it down. And the nice thing about this premise is it's a 2-word pitch, Catholic aliens.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people just want to find out more after that point. And we went from there.
Heck yeah. And so we're excited to chat. We'll talk a little bit about your book, but also about you've been watching our channel a little bit. You had things you wanted to say on some of the topic videos we've had, like religion and sci-fi when we were talking with Jed Hearn, and then other stuff too. You actually have a notepad under your microphone there of you watched the review we did of your book, and you have some list of stuff you wanted to discuss, right?
Which I'm excited to have a little bit of the author rebuttal of our review. That's pretty fun. That's pretty fun for us.
Yeah,
so I'm excited to get into that, though I imagine that will be when we talk more spoiler section. We'll keep that to there.
Yes.
And we'll let you guys know.
But yes, Michael, thank you again for coming on. So I kind of wanted to start with this we talked about your book Pilgrims, but your upbringing or your background was not writing, it was more business. Is that correct? And then you got into the writing world a little bit later in life?
Yeah. So I was always a liberal arts, leaning person. So I went to Boston College, which is a liberal arts school, although they do have an undergrad for business. There was the business school people and then the arts and sciences crowd. And I was a history major there. So I always had an inclination in that direction. And when I graduated from college, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Luckily, my older brother, who is an attorney, gave me sage advice and said, why don't you go work in a law firm before you decide to go to law school? And I did that. And I decided not to become a lawyer. So I always had this kind of arts and letters impulse that was inside me the whole time, but never really something I was willing to explore. So I worked for years in business. I was a China consultant, which is essentially I helped companies go to the Chinese market and get established or find partners over there. I did that for a while. Then I went back to school at MIT, and then I did a startup out of that. So I always had a commercial background for probably the 15 years prior before I put pen to paper on this book. So that was definitely my background. But the whole time I always had stories and ideas in my mind. And one of my life's ambitions was to pull them out of my head and put them down. And so the pandemic was what finally prompted me to actually do that. And that's how Pilgrims was born.
Well, follow up to that then, specifically for your book Pilgrims, how did your business background help you market and sell your book?
I think going back to that go-to-market strategy, the whole time in my head, I always was like, you can write a good book, but you have to be very cognizant on how you're going to sell it, what sort of channels you're going to look for, and things like that. Now, I've come to learn that a lot of people in writing, authors in particular, they're just not really comfortable with the business side of things. They find it's icky. They find the learning curve's too high. It's really difficult. So I think just the background kind of helped in terms of having me just be less scared of it. I meet a lot of people who are just kind of frightened of it when really it's not very hard. Business people are not that, I mean, there's certainly skills, but it's not an unlearnable skill. It kind of is something that just takes a little bit of practice. So that a lot of people won't even publish their book because they're afraid of the inevitable marketing or business side of writing a story. And that was not something that dissuaded me. So it's just something I kept in mind the whole time. And I did some interesting like marketing that not all writers do. I know a lot do, but such as reaching out to you folks and reaching out to other booktubers too, because the more people that can get eyes on your book, in my opinion, the better.
And clearly your marketing worked with us. We saw the email and went, okay, well, fine, we'll read it, whatever. he begged us enough. Now, but here's the genuine question, though, because we hinted at it before before we were talking, we were chatting a little bit off camera. How did you get Jeff Hayes to narrate your audiobook? How? This needs to be a business lesson to everybody listening of Jeff Hayes. He's the best in the business to us. He is the creme de la creme.
He's the best audiobook narrator that I know of, period.
And people who are going to read Pilgrims, you would even recommend to them to listen to it, right, on audiobook?
It's my favorite format of the book. I mean, he takes a book, in my opinion, and moves it into a higher medium. Personally. So I send people in the direction of the audiobook all the time. And Jeff gets royalties from that. And I love it. Like I want Jeff to have immense success from my writing because he just does an amazing work with what it's so gratifying as an author. I'll tell you the story from the beginning. So one of my business kind of attitudes was you want your book available, or at least my attitude was that the more formats that you have, the more readers you can reach. So a lot of authors just do the paperback and ebook, or sometimes just the ebook. I was very adamant that I was going to have hardcover, audiobook, paperback, ebook. So with the audiobook in mind, I just had this kind of suspicion. Everywhere I go, people have headphones on. I mean, the cop doing the like detail to the person checking out groceries to like the banker going in to do some big business deal. Like everyone's got headphones in, and including myself. And so I just really wanted to make sure that part of the book was going to be strong because I think it's one of the only growth areas in publishing, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective. And I just wanted to make sure that I was well positioned for that. But since this was my first book, I had no idea how to go about that. And so I started by Googling who is the best audiobook narrator around. That's where I began. And it's really funny because there's many Reddit threads on this subject. And so you'd get on there and you get a few names. I forget that he's like a major actor, but he did the Harry Potter books. Like he's a fan favorite, but he is an actor too.
Andy Serkis.
No, it's not Andy Serkis.
I thought you were talking Lord of the Rings for some reason that bumped in my head. My bad.
He's like because I think they've done multiple versions. There might be like multicast versions, but I think the original was this old British thespian actor that has been in many movies too. So there was him. There's sometimes audiobooks use like a Tom Hanks or other major actors that can be successful. But a lot of people kept mentioning Jeff Hayes. And I was like, okay, it's just one other name. And they kept saying Dungeon Crawler Carl is the best. And I'd never heard of Dungeon Crawler Carl. In fact, I never heard of the genre of LITRPG. So I thought Dungeon Crawler Carl was like internet speak as like of acclaim. Like, oh, you really Dungeon Crawler Carl'd that. And so it took me a while to realize.
You really cooked that Dungeon Crawler. Yeah.
Yeah, you Dungeon Crawlered that. So I eventually did figure it out and I listened to the book and I was like, this is it. This is the guy. Like, this is the person I need to do my book. And so I just kind of was very focused on him. And what it involved is a lot of emails back and forth. There was a lot of name your price. I'll do whatever you want. Do you need me to fly to Kansas City? And I think most of those went unread because he just gets a lot of emails. But eventually he did open it and he read it and he goes, dude, I'm so sorry that I hadn't gotten to this sooner, but Catholic aliens, let's talk. You had me at the premise. So it really was just the premise itself. And when we did eventually speak, we had a Zoom call. He's like, Yeah, man, it sounds really interesting. I know it's not lit RPG from the way you're describing it, but I'm an artist. Like I'm like a businessman clearly, but I also have an interest in producing great art and yours sounds interesting. So tell me the story. So I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared to just narrate my entire plot
He
to him.
said, sell me this pen, and then
Yeah.
you had a minute to go write something, right? How did you sell it to him then?
Well, no. So I literally had to tell him the plot, and
Yeah.
writers are not great at describing their book. If you ask, I mean, most, I'm sure there are some that are great, but most of them, if you ask them to write a synopsis, like a one pager of your plot, it's harder than writing a draft. Like they're like, can I do another draft of the entire manuscript before I have to write that one pager? It's a really weird thing. I didn't realize that till I had to set out to do it. And so when he got me on the spot like that, I was like a deer in headlights. I'm like, this will be the most boring Zoom call because even if my book was good, like there's no way I'm going to talk about it good. Me no talk good. So he sat there and he listened, and I think I must have been good enough, or maybe the story was compelling enough that he's like, yeah, man, that sounds really awesome. Like, I like that twist you had at the end. Like, I had no idea where you were going to go with that Catholic aliens thing. Like, when you first started speaking, I thought it was just like a parody, but dude, you played it straight. And so it's so cool. You actually took the premise seriously. And I was like, yeah, that was the idea, Jeff. And he's like, yeah, all right, let's do this. So we had to, get our lawyers in touch and sign an agreement and do it. And the way Jeff works is he just takes royalty shares. He does not, like a lot of audiobook narrators, the business model for getting narration is you do a fee called per finished hour. So different narrators can command higher fees. And my audiobook is about 9 hours long. So it would be, 9 times whatever their rate is per finished hour. He doesn't do that. And I was willing to do that. I was like, name a finished hour price. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm fortunate that having had the business background, I was able to, be in the position to offer that. But he's like, no, I like to build assets. I like to take ownership. I only do projects that I believe in. So we're going to have a royalty share. We're going to see what happens. He obviously, does that with all his books, including Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is why he's had so much success. But he's not only an extreme talent, he's a really talented businessman. And so we have had a lot of great conversations over the years since we met, just about like running businesses and the different things you have to keep in mind. And I'm always impressed, not just with his artistic output, but just the decisions he makes. Like he's really kind of a mentor in many ways. And Jeff has been so supportive and so awesome. I am so glad he did eventually open that email and get back to me. So sometimes these emails do work, people. Like sometimes you just have to keep at it. And that's how I got Jeff Hayes. And it's been awesome.
That is so great. And I just find that so funny that in his head, he's like, oh, this Catholic alien mockumentary is going to be awesome. And
I mean, to be fair, on premise, yeah, I completely get that.
Yeah.
That's where your first thought is going to. That sounds hilarious on the surface. But yeah, then playing it straight it's touching. And yeah, it's definitely more of a twist.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, no. I love that it's played straight. And if people haven't seen our review, again, highly recommend checking it out. It'll be in the description below. It's fun. We got our friend to start reading it as well with his dad. He's listening to the audiobook with him and his dad. And they're already very close, but it's like a bonding thing they do weekly now. They listen to your book. And he called me on the phone today and he said, Austin, this is already in my top 10 favorite books I've ever read. And he just finished part 1. And I went, oh, sorry. Nick, bleep his name. I just don't want to put, if you don't mind bleeping his name, Nick. But and I'm like, all right, I love it. I can't, I hope, wow, already? And so, and also he's a very passionate person. And I already know when he finishes the book, he's going to say it's his favorite ever. Because this is, if you could write a book, it is for him. I could not more. And for me, we should talk about this too, because this is a bit awkward, Michael.
Yes.
The character's in the book name is Austin.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Virginia. Why have you been stalking me for years? What's going on?
On the dark web, you're very popular. I'm not really sure why. But your name pops up all over the place, so I just had to start somewhere. But no, it's a happy coincidence. You'll be glad to know. I thought when you read the book, you would throw it against the wall, and I wouldn't get a review from you guys, let alone a good one. Because I think that must be a little bit weird reading. I'm in the name Michael, so like I'm used to seeing that, but Austin's a little less common, or at least in fiction. So I didn't know if your reaction was going to be completely emetic on that one.
It was surprisingly, yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Especially, okay, chapter 1-ish spoilers for it. Austin in this book Austin DeSantis is just the worst. Almost completely despicable, pitiable character. Like, oh God, just despicable. And I loved it. Just hearing this lecherous, terrible character being Austin over and over, I was laughing frequently.
It was surprisingly relatable.
It was great. I loved it.
Very immersive. Very immersive.
There's an Austin in every one of us at the end of the day, Rich.
Yeah.
We can all fall to those depths in hard enough circumstances, or at least sometimes I tell myself that.
In my worst moments, I am an Austin. That's I do have to remember that to humble myself.
Wait, which character? The character. Damn it. So Michael, with pitching that to Jeff Hayes, or whether it's you went the self-published route as well. Is there anything that you've come across, because it's Catholic aliens in that pitch itself, where do you categorize this as Catholic science fiction, or do you put it in science fiction? I know when you post on Amazon, there's different categories you can choose. How do you sell this book to somebody, and how has that been? Because you wrote this for a specific reason. That has there ever been a first contact where a religion is either confirmed by aliens or not? This seems the first of its kind that I could think of, unless I'm mistaken here.
That's my reaction too. I mean, I've had this idea, and what struck me is that no one had already done this. It's kind of insane. And I think there's a lot of historically contingent reasons for that. You have had a little of like aliens prove that there is no such thing as religion, but like not as much as you think, and not as directly. But here's how I think of myself. I think of myself as just a sci-fi author. And there's actually a group of us that similarly are sci-fi fans who got a little bit tired of sci-fi taking such a shallow approach to religion in the world building, in the characterization and the plot. If it's, not every story has to include that, but often when it does, it's done, in our opinion, so ham-fistedly that we're just sci-fi fans who are just like, enough. I'm gonna write something that actually like understands this and doesn't betray that it doesn't. And so my pitch to the sci-fi fans is, and I honestly believe this isn't just like hyperbole. I think it's the most realistic first contact story that's in the canon, or at least in the top 5. I would put this up there with just about all of them, because a lot of those kind of fall apart when you get to the alien motivations, or how powerful the aliens are vis-a-vis the humans. They fall apart. And as a sci-fi fan, I really didn't like that. And so I think my book actually addresses that. And I would, if you want to double click on that more, especially in the spoiler section, I'd be happy to defend myself.
I think in both respects of how do the humans react to aliens, and why would the aliens ever contact Earth? I do get your point of most times it kind of falls flat of, one, if the aliens are so powerful, why do they care about us, or why would they get involved? All those different questions. Yeah, it can often fall flat of like, we're irrelevant to them. Why would they care? Or,
well, hold on. Let's accept Independence Day, where they came for our resources. Just the resources, human resources, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Resources, or or in like Oblivion, how they really need all the water that's at the bottom of the gravity well called Earth, even though there's a bunch floating up in space that you could easily access. But like, it's really important to clone Tom Cruise like 1 billion times to get the water on Earth in Oblivion. So, this is my sci-fi author kind of snarkiness, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
Once you write the book, you're allowed to be this way. That's kind of part of the thing.
Yes, Michael, I mean this like I'm gonna put out the joke. You are my kind of autism. I love this. This is okay. A little risky. I know. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. This is who I need. We were talking before this as well. Of like, Michael, you have a list of all of your interviews that you've done on a spreadsheet, which is so helpful. Like I do the same thing of like I meticulously put down our playlist for Tutor Ramble, and I love that you are very detail oriented with this. And I'm just projecting. Is this coming from your business background as well, to where you're because it seems like those very successful authors, like Sanderson comes to mind, are able to create the art, but then also have this engine that is coming part discipline, but just part having two brains. Like, you have your art brain you can turn on, and you have your business brain you can turn on as well.
I do think they're related. And again, not business isn't like this esoteric set of knowledge or practices. It's more just when I approached the book like it was a business, which meant I wanted to do it professionally. And just like when a lot of people show up to their jobs, they dress in a certain way, they talk in a certain way. There's certain conversations or other things they wouldn't do, and there are certain things that if you're working in a restaurant, you might be that much more meticulous about setting tables and stuff than you would at home when you're doing dinner for yourself. So I think a lot of writers don't actually see it that way. Like, this is their hobby. This is what they're doing away from their professional life. They don't want any of those strictures. I felt it was important to bring that into it. And I do agree with you that I do find there's a consistency between the Sandersons, the Christopher Rocchio too. He's like this, but a lot of the writers who think of it as their book as a business and not just a piece of art.
Yeah.
It's not just like a money grubbing thing. It's actually that, okay, I'm going to show up to this with a professional manner and an attention to detail like I would at a job. And I think that can help authors. And a lot of us have to work in places, and sometimes just bringing that approach, even though it might feel weird, can actually have those advantages. So that's what like the spreadsheet comes in, because I don't do those for fun, but it is helpful if you're trying to do certain things, and including keep track of your interviews that you've been on.
Yeah, Rich, for this podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're the far more organized approach, and I'm just the ball of chaos that brings in change, always wanting change and things. And
Michael, this is just in a part of your psyche. You hate doing the spreadsheets. This isn't something that you just need to do to like check it off your list in your head. I'm projecting again, because the Austin in your book, man, it's just too related. I feel like you understand me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like a connection down to Virginia, an unseen thread, and all that material on the dark web. It's just between the two, I was able to just really get a good fulsome picture of you. Yeah, but no, I'm glad we could connect on this route, because it's so hard when you're a debut author to get any attention, and your guys' attention is invaluable to me, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to take a chance. I know that you're probably get a lot of pressure to talk about all the most popular books only all the time, and it's a real service you're doing to the writing community to keep elevating voices that aren't just the biggest names.
Well, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
We try and do a balance of we want to do popular books too, and also spread the love around or spread the attention, and it also just allows us. A big reason for me of why I like reaching out to other indie books is to actually get something fresh and new that I'm often not going to get. Like with your book, you're right. It's something that was a constant frustration for me with fantasy and sci-fi is generally how religion is portrayed, mainly because I have nothing wrong with the religion being the bad guy or like the main antagonist of a story. Plenty of good stories to be told there. I was mainly just a little tired of it. Like, it was almost predictable. It made stories a little bit boring for me. And then add on top of that of how one-dimensional they really are, of just complete no understanding of what draws people to a religion in the first place. So that's why I appreciate it from your book as well. But getting into your book specifically, how did you come up with the main pitch of Catholic aliens, and what started you that direction?
So I was a little boy in what you call CCD if you're Catholic. But I think they call it something else now, like catechism, Sunday school for all intents and purposes, religious education. And I think I never had heard or never internalized that Jesus Christ was a historical figure. Like no one ever said that. And so I think one day someone put on a video or something and they might have alluded to that. And at the time, this is the mid to early 90s, uh, they had some great television on called like Unsolved Mysteries and Ancient Aliens and all the great Discovery Channel shows where, X-Files was popular at the time. And so I was certain that not only were UFOs like a thing, they're around, they've been here throughout history, they've been observing humans. So as I'm sitting in this dark room watching this low budget religious ed video, I'm like, we can just go ask the aliens in the sky. Like they can tell us what happened 2,000 years ago and put this whole thing to rest. There'll be no other arguments for humanity to have. Like we can move on and just kind of like sort that out once and for all. And so I had that thought as a kid and it just stuck in the back of my mind. Again, I had other pursuits. I wasn't always writing, but when I did feel the desire to come back and get a story out of my head, this was first. And I think it was Nicholas Kotar actually reminded me that it was inspired a bit by the three body problem because I had that China professional background too. So Three Body Problem is up there as like one of the great books and series about, especially in the first contact subgenre. So I can't recommend it enough. And I love that you get kind of the Chinese author's perspective. The Cultural Revolution is a plot point. That's amazing. I mean, that was just ringing all my bells. But I'm reading it and I'm just going, no, the aliens are coming here for a different reason. And so this thought that had been in my head since a little boy kind of blossomed into, you know, if the aliens have been watching us, they've seen this historical event, they can say one way or the other. Wouldn't it be interesting if they affirmed it? And how do I think society would react? Oh, wait, that would not solve all the problems, what I thought when I was a kid. I think that would actually make things worse. In fact, I think it'd be pretty dramatic the ways in which it made things worse. That would be a really good story. Someone needs to tell that story someday. Maybe I'll get it, when I have enough shekels saved up, I'm going to hire a ghostwriter to write that story and put it out into the world. That was literally my first plan. I was going to hire a ghostwriter just to tell this story. I'm really glad I didn't. I ended up writing it, but that's the origin story of this book.
That would have asked Jeff Hayes a lot to also narrate it and write it. Would have been a little bit too far. But I'm
would have gotten
because
a lot more LITRPG elements in that scenario, I suspect.
I do. The comedy route of that would be a fun spin-off for some other story could do that. But I'm curious what you think on this because we hear often about how it's about execution and ideas are cheap. I know Sanderson says that and others say that. We've been talking a lot about your idea, the book's idea and how that was sprouted. How important is that? Because it's the thing that got your book to the place it is now, having a great pitch, not just marketing it, but just being a great hook. The idea propelled it so that people can read the execution that you actually pulled off and did an amazing job. It's just, is the idea more important than we think it is? Do you put more credence into that?
I think I understand the impulse, especially coming from the business background, to downplay. I mean, the idea is like step one on 1,000-mile journey.
Sure,
So
yeah.
there is like a lot of truth to the fact that, yeah, the ideas don't really win at the end of the day. There's a lot more that goes into it. However, I mean, they are important. I mean, there's a reason we kind of cling to them, or someone has a relative that talks about like, I had the idea for the radio alarm clock. I told you I had it. Like people really do care about ideas. In my case, it was really important for me to not just have the initial premise. I think I'm actually pretty decent at those. It's probably just like a weird cognitive thing where I kind of come up with like funny what ifs or high concept questions. So Catholic aliens is interesting, but what I thought was more interesting about the book, and you can let me know if you agreed, the obvious route, the kind of like knee jerk route, is to take it in the parody direction, which would go against obviously
Yeah.
my disposition, but there's something about taking the first move it's usually not the right move, not because it's bad, but because you can squeeze more juice out of that fruit. And so it's like, yeah, that's interesting. Like you could see how you could do the farce about the religious aliens that show up, but like You know what would be even cooler? Like if you did the other thing that people weren't expecting, which is to take the premise really seriously.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's this quote, and I always fail to attribute it, but I think if people Googled it, they could get it. The sci-fi authors are kind of amateur futurists by default. That's like what you're up to in the trade. And it said the good futurist doesn't just predict the automobile, they predict the traffic jam. So in that process of like getting to the next order kind of more interesting parts of the idea, you can suss out some of the elements that make it really interesting and can take it further. For example, with regard to Pilgrims, I've got Catholic aliens. I'm going to play it straight, and I think like that'll be very different from what else is on the market. If I did the farce, that might be novel, like unique, but I think it would play out quickly. The other thing that I did is, how do you tell a story about Catholic aliens showing up? I mean, another great work of fiction is World War Z. That is a travelogue, kind of done in I forget the World War II historian who went and got oral retellings of World War II. But that's like such a cool like zombie apocalypse. It's been done a lot, but let me do it in the vein of a World War II kind of retelling oral history. It's amazing because we can tell a global scope story. We can focus on the elements you wouldn't see in a zombie apocalypse typically. It's so cool. I love that book, and I definitely thought about doing that for the Catholic aliens. You know, what's the reaction here? What's the reaction over there? But I thought about it longer because, like, you do kind of want to know the global scoop. But I've really believe that the stories that really impact us are located in the change of an individual, something, a character that we can get behind and follow, or at least go on their journey. I think that's why Star Wars: A New Hope works so well, because it introduces this universe that is so broad and so interesting. You want to know more, but it's really a very compact story of coming age from Luke, the classic hero's journey. I know you guys are aware of, but uh, I think without that, if it was just a different plot elements about this coolly imagined Star Wars universe, I don't think it would have had as much purchase as it did. So it's important. The idea is, I think it is really important, the idea, but I would just caution everyone, once you have the idea, push it. Just keep pushing it. And that's where the
Mm.
real gold comes out.
Do you want to get into more spoiler aspect of it then?
We could do that more toward the end.
More toward the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll wait then.
Yeah, they'll be just for those who have read the book. Go read it. But yes.
All right. Then to keep it still spoiler free then.
Yes.
Your choice to make it then a more personal story. I'm curious on how you developed the main character. Did Austin come from just out of the air? I know the real answer is that you
Yes.
followed
That's the
Austin
real
from the
canon.
Dark Web, but is any of his story more personal to you? Do you know a person that really inspired this character?
Or is it Augustine's Confessions at all? Is that the inspiration?
Yeah, so that's on the back cover copy. I call the book a sci-fi retelling of Augustine's Confessions, or Augustine.
Augustine's, yeah.
Both pronunciations are okay.
Mhm.
And a lot of people like, one of the great things about writing this book is that it's gotten people to realize Augustine's Confessions is a thing. Despite being one of the pillars of the Western canon, literally invented the genre of memoir, or that kind of autobiography that was just unseen until literally his book came along. And it's foundational to ethical and Western thought. I mean, and if you read it now, it is. I mean, it's a 1600-year-old book, but it's so approachable. And it's one of the best ways to see that people in the past are real people and not just like these cardboard cutouts that we tend to make of them. Um, I was able to kind of call attention to this, despite how uh, foundational the work is, because a lot of people have never heard it. And so you cannot substitute my book, substitute Confessions with my book, not even close. But um, Austin, when I decided it was going to be one person, I was like, okay, well, there needs to be a redemption type of story, a Cinderella story. The arc needs to be um, like a classic arc for a hero. Um, there's a few heroic arcs, but like one of the classic ones. And I think Augustine's Confessions, it's about a real person. It's an autobiography, but it works. And I thought, it's Catholic aliens. Like, what if I just kind of follow the arc of the real Saint Augustine? And so that's more or less how the plot came together. So when in chapter one, Is this a? Can I? I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
spoil chapter
Chapter
one.
one.
Chapter one's totally fine.
When
Yeah.
he's trying to, with all his might, get his money together to spend the night before the aliens show up. So the night before Armageddon in his mind, he's pretty sure their arrival spells the end of the earth. With an e-girl for an in-person hookup. Um, the real Saint Augustine it's in his autobiography. He was a Roman citizen guy in the late 300s. I mean, he was at the brothels all the time. I think there's like a point where when his dad sees that he's, having the teenager turning, he's like, "Oh, my son's a man," and wants to take him out to to see the ladies of the night at that
Mm.
point. And so that's my inspiration. So I'm really pulling very deliberately from the Confessions, which you don't have to have read at all to understand my book. But if you do, you're like, I see what he's doing. And I get emails all the time of, I loved your book. I just bought a copy of the Confessions. And like, that's worth it to me because like that is real food compared to mine.
That's also something we've talked about this in the past. Our stories being told today just contextualize more modern of stories we have told before. Not to denigrate or degrade. Hey, we need to be told these stories again and again. Obviously, we're talking about similar themes, but do you find that true that a lot of modern books are just highlighting some very important things that have been written about 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago and so forth?
I think that's what a lot of great art does. I mean, Tarantino is famous. I mean, his movies are popular, and he's doing straight up homages to all sorts of other films, like independent or foreign, that most people have never seen before, and he's cribbing them pretty directly. And it is from a place of love. It's not just copy and paste. And so I don't know. I think my attitude on that is, yeah, great art copies one another. That's what you do, and it's that start there. Actually, start there. Don't try to be too original. I would argue, because I think art is an iterative process and not necessarily a revolutionary process.
What does it mean to
Mm.
be original then? How when people say that, what do they mean?
Uh, I'll tell you what I mean by it. I do think that it's like all of us people have, if you looked at humanity, the DNA is pretty similar. We're all have so many chromosomes or whatnot. Like there's the human genome, but every individual is radically different and unique and irreplicable. So that's, to me, like, I think you want original in the sense that you are an original artifact, you, the individual person, and not original like I have to come up with a new species out of thin air. I think when you try to do that, you probably can't. And I mean, maybe there's examples of it, and Godspeed to the people who manage that, but I'm certainly not capable of that. So the best I can do is kind of take the genome that is overwhelmingly similar and then just play at the margin. I think that's original enough. I don't know what other people mean when they're talking about it, but that's kind of how I think about it.
I think there are the one in a million individuals that are the revolutionaries in terms of art that break down the boundaries, but typically those are the people that understand the boundaries that the art exists and are deeply talented at the genre that may exist. And this exists for writing, also for visual and musical. You can even think of like Mozart being a key figure of the classical music. He was very good at playing and writing music of the time, but then also he iterated, he changed the genre. Same thing with Beethoven, things like that. And so I think for most of us mortals, it's good you have to learn the boundaries of what the art is. Don't try to reinvent the wheel or break down the fence and borders. Like, try to understand what the art is first. And then maybe one in a million artists can figure out how to just push that boundary a little further in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that framing. Totally.
Is the I'm gonna get it wrong. What is it? It starts with an E. It's the long word. We were talking about it with Rocky and I, Wizard Jordan, in a chat we were doing. Oh my goodness, it'll come to me.
Catastrophe?
No, not you catastrophe. It's basically when you take if everything, it's the philosophical concept is everything just impressions of things, and then two impressions create an idea. Where it's, hey, I get the impression of a horse, and then, or I get the impression of a horse, and I get the impression of a rhino. Combine that, and I have the idea of a unicorn. Oh my goodness, what the heck is it? Oh, it's gonna bug me here. I'll look it up real quick.
I say we need Christopher here because he's an encyclopedia with this stuff.
Yes. Here it is. Okay, David Hume. Empiricism. All right, that didn't just take me 10 minutes. Empiricism. That we were talking about that with Rockio and iWizard in a chat. But that's a subsect of people that's an idea people believe in. If your worldview is, hey, things are impression, and that creates an idea. Is that what originality is, or is it more than that? Because does that take away then the uniqueness of soul and all of that? So there's a lot of debate there of just what is originality. And this isn't a question, it's just a statement. I find it interesting. Do you guys find that interesting too? Just where does this all come from?
I mean, if you want to talk about originality, rather than a specific thing, like an actual definition or some hard and fast rule, to me, there's works that you can see that there's a soul behind it, and there's works that you see that feels empty inside. And I think that's where you get the feeling of originality. And you can still see like, oh yeah, this pulled from this idea. Hey, this idea came from here. Hey, they were clearly inspired from this. But at the heart of it, you still go, oh, but there's still a soul here. There's still something like creative. I can feel an intent behind it, and not just cheap copies. And then other things it feels empty, that it's just copying. It's just pulling an idea because that's the expedient thing to do, rather than an homage. So that's the general feeling. So I don't know if it's at least when I think of something as whether it's original or not, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm looking for the soul of it. And that's why when you look at AI art, for me, is I see no soul behind it. And it can be as beautiful, like AI has gotten pretty good at a lot of this different animation stuff where it can look beautiful if given enough time, but it feels empty and soulless. So that's at least how I see originality. How do you see it, Michael?
There's I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I hadn't considered the AI art factor because there is some really beautiful imagery that gets created, but there is something missing, and it's hard. I mean, I think you put your finger on it really well. This soul's kind of hard to nail down. With Pilgrims, this is my debut book, so there's all sorts of jitters and self uh, criticism and all the stuff that comes with writing a book and putting it out to the world. And obviously, I think I can get better at the craft, but there's a long way to go. But I did feel with people, I would say, I don't know if you'll like it, but I think you're going to say it's original. So that was like one of my pitches to a lot of people. So you guys are the book reviewers. What do you think?
Well, we rated it pretty darn highly. I at least think it has a soul. Like you can tell there's actual care behind it rather than just generative and iterating for a business sake. At least what my impression of it.
Also original, actually, right? But not original. It could be so subjective because, hey, it could be the most cliche thing ever, but I just hadn't read a book like that before. Now, obviously, this idea I truly do think, as far as I know, doesn't exist. And even if it did, what if that's why even Lord of the Rings could seem cliche to the person who's read a bunch of books that were inspired by Lord of the Rings, and they just read backwards. You read a bunch of books today, then you read a bunch of books from the 70s and 80s that were inspired. Then you read Lord of the Rings and you go, wait, that's just all the same stuff I've already read. But in their life, that they encountered Lord of the Rings after having read so many books, and you'll have just such a different experience. So that's always the difficult thing of how much credit does the actual does Tolkien or does whoever makes that actual movement in a subgenre, creates a subgenre of epic fantasy, deserve the credit, and how your subjective experience of that's going to so much matter on just could be the order or environment you read it.
So many classic novels that we've read. I'm thrown for a loop of how do I judge this, because I'm reading these passages and going, if I read this at the time it was written, I wouldn't know that these twists and turns happen, because these are the origins of the cliches. Reading the Count of Monte Cristo and seeing that the classic revenge story and all of these different tropes that I've seen popped up so many other times in different books, and going, well, I see it coming here, even though I haven't read this book before. I know it by its influences. Same thing with Dracula. Of all the little details of Dracula, before even reading the book, I knew all the details, all little twists and turns, and I'm wondering to myself, should I really judge the book based on, like, is that even fair? Is that fair to the book that I'm reading all of its influences, and then I go back to the original and go, so cliche, so unoriginal? It's like, that's not fair. It started it.
That does loop us back to that idea of idea versus execution, where a book executed that well, classic, because the execution is what matters with more staying power or lasting power. You could read Lord of the Rings, or you could read any of these classics over and over again, and just because in a vacuum, it's good in and of itself, which is, I think, why that is pervade a lot of why execution matters. Because no matter, hey, look, I have an idea. Okay, then what are you going to do with it? Michael, kind of going this roundabout way of just wherever this originality comes from. I just found it very interesting, because in book marketing, especially debut authors, that is a huge focus to go, hey, how can you capture somebody's attention? We do it here on YouTube all the time. You'll see, hey, top 10 video, whatever can get the most clicks to then hopefully funnel somebody into then watch a long form conversation that you're having. That's only the step one, as you put it. But anything here that we're saying, does it ring true for you, or do you have any thoughts on that of just when people are reviewing your book, if they say something's cliche or tropey, how do you respond, or how would you want people to look at literature in general when it comes to cliches?
Yeah, trope gets a bad name. Tropes are critical. I think that they are the signposts that we as readers use to understand narrative. They're shortcuts, and they're shortcuts for a reason. They're Lindy. They're almost like an emergent phenomena, and so you can use them wrong, but I think it's appropriate to use them. So I mean, I definitely have a lot of tropes in my book. I played with tropes. My
first contact to trope.
Yeah, mine was, the aliens land on the White House lawn and say, "Take me to your leader." So I just played with that trope and said they land at the Vatican and say, "We want an audience with the Pope." That was my play on that trope pretty directly. And it was interesting that you talked about these. There's like the first mover disadvantage. These kind of genre setting works, whether it's Dracula or I forget the other one that you mentioned,
Lord of the Rings, Monte Cristo.
Lord of the Rings and Monte Cristo, like they do suffer because they will have people that see that move and then iterate and improve on it. But they obviously, you want to find yourself in the position of Lord of the Rings with every once in a while a reader says, I've already read this before. It's like, okay, I got more where that came from. But that was a big motive for me in writing this book. I mean, so as a Catholic, so my faith journey, I was raised Catholic, and like a lot of people in my 20s and 30s, I fell away, became an atheist, agnostic, very, very, probably hostile to religion, or I thought it was a thing that dumb people did. And I realized how stupid that made me sound in hindsight, but that was where I was. And incidentally, it was at MIT that I kind of they call it reverting when you go back. I went back to Catholicism, and it was largely from intellectual, but also kind of personal things, but really just kind of realizing that there's some of the most brilliant people in existence and alive today are religious, and it's definitely not a intellectual cop out. It's usually people who think themselves sophisticated that have airs, and that was me, that kind of think that it's not appropriate for them. So that with that as a background, I looked at this terrain in the genre of how has this never been written before? Like, why aren't there a series of stories from the 40s, 50s, or 60s about all the aliens that arrived, said one religion's true, or this alien religion is true, or no religion is true, and just see where the chips fell and all that. Um, but there wasn't. And I think the reason is there's a lot of historically contingent reasons for that I could get into. Like, I think it has to do with the editors at the magazines and what they wanted to promote. And then once
Mm.
those stories became popular, people thought that this affectation was a core component of the genre itself. But the the result was, here I was in the 21st century, and no one had really written a story like this. Childhood's End is a little bit like that by Arthur C. Clarke, but it's not quite so focused on the religious aspect. And so, as a Catholic, I felt kind of motivated, almost rushed to set down the flag so that anyone who does aliens arrive in a human religion in the sky is a derivative work from Pilgrims. There was gonna be, that's like a Pilgrims type story where they
You're the
show up.
first mover. You're the
I had
uncaused
to be.
cause.
I at least in this little speck of existence. Uh,
Yes.
and I know you guys were talking about that in your review. You actually said, like, he must have been chomping at the bit to write this. And that's true. You guys
Yeah.
saw through the pages to the actual author on the other side. And I was like, not that I was worried that like someone else was furiously writing somewhere, um, and was definitely going to publish a book about, I don't know, Presbyterian aliens, or I don't know, the Moonies aliens, or whatever random thing that show up, and the plot ends up really similar. Although there definitely was a part of me that would imagine that in my fevered nightmares and would write that much harder. But I just was like, I kind of want to set the terms of this debate. I want to kind of set the standards in which we talk about it. And one of them being, let's take this seriously. Like it's so much more interesting, the character motivations, when they take this seriously, rather than like Catholic aliens, but
Mm.
I actually did try to go traditional. I really wanted to do traditional initially. I'm glad I didn't, because I really enjoy being the publisher. It's kind of allows the business background. But as you know, you have to send query letters to agents. You have to get an agent to go to traditional publishing. And I got a lot of full manuscript requests. Some people, when they send their letters, says, "Hey, I wrote a book about something. Here's like 2 pages or 5 pages." A lot of the time you get a no thank you or no response. I got a decent amount of, "Hey, we'd love to see that thing. Send that over." And I was like, yes, this is great. But more than one came back with, "Oh, I thought this was going to be a joke. Like, I thought you were going to be making fun of Catholics. So I don't think this is for me." And I would always react like, that's not what the public wants. Like, that's the easy move. I think people want to
Mhm.
see a more serious take because it would be more interesting. So I was chopping at the bit to try to claim this territory so that, I'm not sure how people will be talking about this, if there'll be a lot of followers of people writing about, the different aliens and their religions that show up in the sky. But if I can be the one that kind of set the terms, that would be really cool.
Why do you think that is the reaction in the sci-fi world of it? People expected it to be more of the joke and not being taken as seriously.
I really think I gave a speech about this at Doxicon this year, which is a conference in Washington, D.C. Um, the 20th century was filled with the affectation and the understanding that smart people don't believe in religion. Like, that was the water that I swam in growing up. If you watch Star Trek at all, but even especially the Next Generation, the Captain Picard's out there talking about, oh, these worlds are primitive. They haven't outgrown religion yet. Almost like inferring that, or implying that religion is something that smart people naturally grow out of. That's how you become a sophisticated adult in the world. Now, there'll always be these adults who aren't sophisticated, but you're a sophisticated intellectual person, so you don't have this. And that really permeated the sci-fi genre. I think it was a cultural thing that was happening, but sci-fi in particular got that, and got that in a heavy dose. And so, as a sci-fi fan, and many other people as a sci-fi fan, it was hard not to take that on. And I think what ends up happening is, for 50, 60 years, when people are writing a book a certain way, they think that there's these unwritten rules about the genre that I think don't actually exist. So it would be, oh, you're doing like, let's take Andy Weir. And I think he's very classic. Like, he writes very classic sci-fi stories, and they're really well written. Like, there's so much good you could say about Andy Weir's books. But I think he's very much of that school. I know that personally he's not really religious, but he takes the kind of traditional tack in the industry of like, we're not going to go near that. I'm going to be just like, he might call it benign neglect. I might argue it's malignant neglect, but if we just don't address it, we're doing the safe thing. That's right. And I think it makes his stories worse? Yeah, like in Project Hail Mary, where it says Hail Mary in the title. I know we're talking about football, but like it does have a history that is longer than football. I think he could have gotten into the religious element more, or it would have been interesting if that guy was religious, his main character. But Andy Weir sells a lot more books than me, so what do I know? But personally, like so a lot of the agents, a lot of the publishers, they're just looking backwards. They look historically as what worked, but they don't see around corners. And coming from business, the publishing field, I got to tell you, it is sclerotic. It is
Hmm.
like it is. Let me talk about it in technical terms. They don't publish books. That is not what you do as a publisher. The amount of titles in a given year that you sell into the market. So what you think of a publisher is doing is acquiring manuscripts, editing them, putting them out into the world. Marketing is not the business of HarperCollins. The business of HarperCollins is the backlist of all the things that they did in the past. And almost like an oil royalty, where they just take a revenue stream of an IP that has been in the ground for a while and they have the rights to. The most of their money comes from things that have been done not just years ago, but decades ago. And so this thing that you think of what publishing is doing, it's not actually what it's up to. It's an organization that's there to just kind of hold on to IP and milk it. And so that makes them, for cultural, but just from a technical kind of physics perspective, like the architecture of the incentives in that industry, not very innovative, like in any way. So allergic to innovation that it's almost surprising, because you think like, I'll give a Jeff Hayes story if you don't mind indulging me on this.
Oh, we love those stories. Yes.
So I said that. So Jeff has some of the best insight into the lit RPG subgenre out there. Now, as you are probably aware, because he's so ensconced in it, he's behind so many of the productions in it, that he's got great numbers on how lit RPG does. Who's buying it. Like, he's got a really good lens into that field. And romance is by far the biggest genre, as all writers know. Sci-fi is unfortunately not. And that's because most readers are women. Most women, or a lot of those female readers, are consuming romance, and they're consuming a lot of it. They're not just having like the top readers are consuming it quite regularly, and it's usually your strongest users. Like your top, it's very Pareto distributed. Your top users are where most of your revenue is coming from. So the interesting thing about lit RPG is it's the same dynamics, but for men. Men who are lit RPG fans are voraciously and repeatedly reading lit RPG. And I'm just like, oh, isn't that like the unlock? Like, you've found the parallel thing. You've got this part of the market, the female side, traditionally, with the romance, and then you have this male side. Like, why doesn't, like, I get that a HarperCollins or whatnot, or one of the big ones, they're like not going to become experts on lit RPG. But what would be the expenditure organizationally? Let's call it $500,000. At least that's what I would think, of top ghostwriters putting out like 10 lit RPG novels at trad publishing level quality and doing a little marketing campaign behind it. I mean, that's trivial to these organizations in the grand scheme of things. And so Jeff described all those dynamics. I go, Jeff, why don't they do this? And he goes, they would never do it. They're never going to ever take a risk like that. Because one, it could fail. They don't really try things like that. And that's just baffling to me, as coming from like the startup world or whatnot. To me, it's like low hanging fruits for soft expenditures. I think it would be easy money. I mean, Dungeon Crawler Carl became a self-published hit. And if you're big enough self-published, they'll come around and offer you a deal. But why not get in front of these IPs, not wait till they get big? And I don't know. Hey, New York, you can take this idea and run with it if you like, but I just don't think it will happen. I don't think I will live long enough to see that occur.
The first idea that came to my mind, if we're doing this impression creates idea, is a lit RPG romantasy. Because if you get both audiences, maybe try something every time you level up, you fall further in love. The male protagonist falls further in love with a female protagonist, and it's like, oh, it's this weird thing. The man doesn't want to, but it's like the enemies to lover. I'm seeing it now. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? Here's what I think.
Yeah.
What if there were parallel books of you have one book that is primarily a romance novel from a woman's POV, and it's marketed toward women, and in the same universe, within the same, like the exact same story, the male perspective is more of a lit RPG. The romance is a significant part of it, but it is not the whole thing. It's his story.
Two point of views.
And so it's both point of views. More women are consuming you could have both in there. And each POV is targeted toward their respective demographics.
We got ideas here.
Colleen Hoover, get on it. Colleen, get the lit RPG version for the male market. Let's do it.
We're dungeon crawler Carling this right now. Whatever verb that you said that is, we're doing that.
Imagine a whole book told from the perspective of Xaden from Fourth Wing.
Yeah.
But, only about a fourth of it is actually the romance aspect of it. The rest of it is him trying to level up his connection and powers with his dragon.
Totally.
And
Rich, I'll tell you the key ingredient too. You talked about soul. Jeff also had this great kernel. He's like, and the other thing too is the audience, like they'll know right away if the writer has never gamed at all in his life.
Yeah,
so they have to find someone, and there's probably plenty of writers out there, including Matt Dinneman, who did Dungeon Crawler Carl. But someone like the only way this fails, because that's a brilliant idea, is if someone has never, they're like, how hard could it be? I'll just write the lit RPG. No, like you have to know what you're talking about. But yeah, I think that's gold.
And then the woman protagonist who's in there as the guy's leveling up, she's like, she likes the bad boy, the villain of every boss level. every next level when the mob boss comes, she's like, ooh, I kind of like the orc dragon monster thing.
Every installment, the new male protagonist is the villain.
Yeah, man, we got something here. This could be a fun parody.
I honestly just think that would be really cool of two books. Not because have you ever read Ender's Shadow?
I never made it that far in the Ender series.
Ender's Shadow takes place over the exact same time period as Ender's Game, but told from Bean's perspective, one of the side characters. I think it'd be cool to do that type of idea.
Romantasy lit RPG.
Yeah. But like they're not the same story, but from two different POVs. Almost two completely different stories overlapped at the same time period. That'd be fun.
Man, well, okay, we're gonna have to co-author that. Well, Michael, you can get some of the royalties too.
Well, I'm sure you see the discourse of everyone lamenting that there's not enough books published for men. They are, in the indie section, and lit RPG in particular as a subgenre is the romance for men. They want gaming.
Yeah.
They want gaming type books. That's what.
Well, there's also manga. Manga in the
right.
West is a lot of men read manga as well. So that's probably taken most of the market share of male readers. So that's my guess. But do you think that I'll bring up the question to you. Do you think that the publishing industry doesn't cater toward men or doesn't pursue men as a market, and that's why men don't read as much? Or is it the opposite, where because men are not reading as much, publishing industry doesn't quote unquote cater to men? Or which direction do you think that is?
Yeah, since I'm self-published, I have my own press. It's all the publishing industry's fault. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, I'm going to heap as much scorn and blame on them as they can until someday I might change my tune, except for whatever imprint shows up with the money truck. But no, I lean towards the supply side. I think it's the supply side. I think pointing. I mean, especially I just think structurally, there are fewer men reading. I think that is an issue. Although audiobooks, I think, does kind of play with that math, and I consider that reading. But you can't blame them if you're not producing the content, and then you double click on a lot of the stories and some of the stuff that gets out of there and the different editors and how they go at it. There's enough stuff that you can look up online but that just kind of corroborates it, in my opinion. So no, I do think it's a supply side problem. And And I'm obviously doing my part to try to include this, help that supply side imbalance. I have a lot of readers who are women, and I love it. But sci-fi typically is tends to be of a more male dominated genre, and I think we need more better sci-fi out there.
Want to end it with this, then we can go into Pilgrim spoilers next.
Okay.
Because talking about sci-fi, lit RPG, that's a subgenre of sci-fi, right? Would we consider it that basically? I guess.
Thing is, lit RPG could be
Is it its
fantasy.
own thing? I guess.
Could be
It
its
is-
own.
It's generally, I think it's a subgenre of both fantasy and sci-fi, because I do know of ones that are fantasy based. And that, what would you, Michael, would you happen to know what it's called, or what derivative it is? It's
empiricism. That's what you're
thank
looking
you.
for.
Not lit RPG, but
It's a Japanese word.
yeah, it's the one like cultivation, is it something like that?
Oh no, I was
it's-
thinking of there's a Japanese word where like an ordinary person gets transported into like
Oh, Isekai.
Isekai.
Isekai. I was gonna
There's
say
that
isekai.
genre. I'm trying to think of, because lit RPG takes the more sci-fi-ish route of it, of it's a gamify this, but on the other hand, the more fantastical is like the cultivation, where it's still, it's more mystical, it's soul, but like you level up, like you've powered up your soul core, whatever, to next level. Now you have all these different powers, and it's the same vein, but far more fantastical and from the East inspired.
Sure.
But what would you say? Which avenue is lit RPG? What subgenre is it of?
I think it's gonna get under the heading of sci-fi, but I think just like how sci-fi was thought that it was an elemental part of the genre to excise religion or scorn religion, which I argue is not the case. And I think we're increasingly going to see works that realize that was a historically contingent factor and not elemental to the genre. Why I say that it's going to go in the sci-fi direction for lit RPG is just look at Dungeon Crawler Carl. I mean, that will be the breakout hit. That if you know of this genre, it's probably because you've heard of that book. And his plot line is that aliens come and set up a game. There are many other lit RPGs that don't go that way. That's not their approach at all. But that's what the big hit did. And so I think a lot of people are going to infer that, especially writers, but also readers, that, oh, the way that these RPG scenarios get set up is aliens come. And so I think it'll kind of get pigeonholed when it could just as easily include fantasy elements. And I know a lot of the works do. But that's my kind of prediction. And hopefully, writers don't take that too not literally, they don't feel too constrained by that, because I don't think if you want to write fantasy lit RPG, that's totally going to work.
What is sci-fi to, and why is your book science fiction? You wouldn't say Catholic sci-fi. Obviously, it has Catholic elements, but you'd advertise, hey, this is a sci-fi book. Why would you say that? What is the genre to you?
The classic is there a spaceship or a dragon on the cover? I know
Sure.
that's kind of a cheap thing to say. Why? So my book in particular is essentially our world, but with like a slight change. It's and then not all sci-fi is that. It can be a space opera. It can be the far future. Mine's set in the near future, so like a world like ours. What makes it science fiction? Like, what are the core things that discern it from other elements? I think it's that touchstone with reality that, like, in an alternate version of our world or in a future version of our world, there's some plausibility to the narrative. Like, it's Lord of the Rings isn't. I know that there's like this Tolkien. This was our history. Without going there, Lord of the Rings is not a world we will ever exist in, or could imagine that world history in the last 2,000 years could have looked like. It's totally separate. Whereas Project Hail Mary is a book that you could see happening. So I think that's where sci-fi really and this was very critical for me in writing Pilgrims. The plausibility is so critical to, I think, a lot of people's enjoyment. Now, in Christopher Arrocchio's Sun Eater, where you're tens of thousands of years in the future, plausibility takes on a different dimension. But when you're setting it closer to home, it looks, there's different elements. But I think that's when you boil it down, for some, as fantastical as many science fiction works are, it's the plausibility that really hooks fans such as myself. There's like a weird way in which it feels like it could be possible in our reality, even if it's unlikely to come to pass. So I guess in the back of my mind, and very deliberately when I was doing Pilgrims, plausibility was at the heart of it. So that's kind of how I conceptualize the genre.
Versus fantasy being more of an impossibility, right? Just, hey, that is something that you're not predicting, you're not gauging, you're not trying to play with what's our current technology and push that 10,000 years in the future. This is just new world or made up things. Just come up with I guess, do you think, sorry, I won't go on too much longer. I want to get to your book, but do you think that sci-fi needs to be somewhat accurate in some way? Because that also depends. Is it near sci-fi or far in the future? But how accurate does it need to be? Because I'll just state the question instead of opining. But yes, what do you think?
Plausible is not, I don't know if accurate, quibbling with words, but plausible. Like, let's take The Man in the High Castle, right? The Axis wins World War II. So that's kind of partly historical. That's not really our future. I would call it more sci-fi because it's our world, and there is plausibility to it. Like there's definitely it's not hard to imagine scenarios where they win. Now, would it look like The Man in High Castle? Probably not. I don't know that that's how it would play out, but like you can grip onto that and see like, oh, like this seems like something that could happen. So is it accurate? Like as I do have a history degree from undergrad. So that makes me basically as equal to any historian out there. I just don't think that if the Axis had won, it would have looked like his book. So I could call that inaccurate, but like you get it.
Michael, this
the
is
bad
not
guys won
surprised me
World War
after you
II.
talked about water on asteroids being like, well, technically the water wouldn't be there. And then which is accurate, by the way.
That. Yeah, so both are plausible. It just depends on what type of autism you have, I think.
Yes. Okay, I'm glad this went full circle. Okay, and before we get, so this is going to be a spoiler warning in a second. Everybody, if this is your last chance, go check out Pilgrims. Link in the description below. Michael's been very gracious for this time. Thank you. We're going to try to steal a little bit more from you, Michael. Do you want to start talking full spoilers about Pilgrims?
Yeah, I'm ready. I can't wait.
All right, spoiler warning, and this is going to be exciting because Michael has his notes in front of him, a review of our review pretty much, a condemnation of our review.
However, I did have an initial question for you before you get
into spoilers?
It's in spoilers.
Okay.
It's in spoilers, but I wanted to ask about some of the structural questions.
Yeah.
So
full spoilers.
In our review, we're talking about a key structural element that I can see if this was taken out or slightly changed, the book would not work the same way it did. The first chapter being an instance where you see the aliens actually killing the children and leaving the baptized child alone. And then flashing back to Austin, and that being a flash forward in the very beginning. Was that a late addition to the story, or was that planned from the beginning of how it would be structured?
The second one, and I'll tell you the story behind it. Okay. I told you kind of the process, like Catholic aliens. Oh, it'd be interesting if they took it seriously. Oh, I want to locate that in one person. But then I really struggled with how do you tell that story? And the Arabian apocalypse did pop into my head, and I was like, if I can just get that reader to the midpoint twist, if I can just get them there. And I was thinking, like, how do I do that? Like, how do I make so compelling enough? And it just popped into my head one day. I don't know where. It was clearly inspired by Breaking Bad. If you've ever seen it, the first few scenes of the first episode, and Vince Gilligan says this explicitly. He says, I was going to talk about life of a chemistry teacher. I didn't want to lose people about going into that. So I start with an RV swerving around the world, guys with gas masks, bodies floating all around. It crashes. A man gets out in his underwear, puts a gun to his head as sirens come. Boop, we go to the classroom with Walter White. He's teaching chemistry class, not everyone's favorite subject in school, but very important for the plot. So had he started with chemistry class, as opposed to that flash forward, because we get that closure later in the episode, we see how he ends up in that RV and whatnot. So it clicked. And that's actually when I finally started putting pen to paper, because I was struggling mentally, being like, I want to tell the story. It's so good. And then when I was like, take the midpoint twist, and it's not technically the midpoint twist, but take that big critical element and put it right up front so that the right readers know the stakes. They know that it's not just going to be, because there's the obvious, you could be silly about Catholic aliens. Oh, Catholic aliens, ha 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 ha. Or you could be church lady about Catholic aliens. And these aliens come and they're so good and they're so nice. And oh, nice alien, they're so holy. And no one wants, I mean, maybe someone wants to read the first book. No one wants to read the second book. And so
Yeah.
I need to make it very clear from the outset that, oh, no. Like, I'm not going there, because I personally, we can maybe get into this, but I consider my book a rebuke. I consider my book a rebuke to the argument from divine hiddenness, which is one of the things you kind of talked about in your review. And so I clearly have a perspective, and I kind of wanted to highlight what that perspective is from the very first pages. It's an effective filter, by the way. I think if it's good to get rid of the bad reviews early with people who put the book down so quick they don't feel the need to review the book, or otherwise are hooked and want to keep reading.
That's great.
Yeah, it especially because I know throughout most of the book, that's where the tension comes from, especially of the waffling of back and forth with Austin and his decisions on what is he going to do? Does he believe the aliens? Is he going to betray his new friends? Or because he's always being bounced back and forth. And that it wouldn't work nearly as well without the reader knowing that first chapter of, because so much of the believability of the general is because you as the reader going, this guy, he's lying to you, Austin, constantly. Well, why do you believe him? But us as the reader going, the general was right. We know at some point it's going to happen. So it worked really well. I wanted to know if that was a late edition or early, so I'm happy to hear it.
It's funny because prologues get a bad rap too, and a lot of agents, because you have to send your pages to agents, and they ask for the first 5 pages. So I was like, because you don't meet my main character in the prologue, you meet him in chapter 1, and there's a huge debate about whether you should include a prologue. Most people would argue you shouldn't. And I was like, well, what if mine is like extreme baptism, where if the priest doesn't baptize you, you get murdered because you're Muslim, and the robots start praying. Like, is that prologue good enough? Like, can that work? And yeah, I think it was the right choice. My editors agree, but the consensus is don't do a prologue, just avoid it. And I think my book wouldn't work without my prologue.
Definitely. I definitely agree.
Yeah, that was crucial.
Now, I just wanted to ask that question. Now you have the floor. What is your rebuke of our review? You have notes.
No, my notes are that, if any book gets a 5.5 stars, I think this is the only one that should. I mean, I think you should change the rating scale. What a travesty. No, I love when people talk, like, the ideas in my book are certainly my perspective. I've clearly put a lot of time thinking into them, but I really love when other people take the same idea and just run with it. My book, I consider there's 2 high concept questions in it. The first is, what happens if Earth discovers aliens are coming to Earth? They'll arrive in 5 years and they won't talk to you. Like, what happens? That's basically the first section of my book. That's part 1. The second question my book poses is, like, what if when the aliens arrive, they say they're Catholic? And I just could sit in rooms, and if I could sit across from people who wanted to take those 2 questions seriously and really ponder them with me, I know I have my own conclusions, but it would be such a joy to just be sitting there and talking. And so that's how I felt with your guys' review. Like, that you've had my version of events and you've really thought about it. And I'm just like, I just want to reach through the screen and be like, man, I want to chat about this book too. So I had some things that I just were reactions more as you guys were going. And
So
I think we've
cool.
touched on a lot of it during the interview. Like, for example, the prologue and the premise, like why it's important to really be clear about your pitch as an author. Like, you started talking about that early in your review, and I'm like, I have a lot of thoughts on that. That's something else. But one thing that really stuck out is Rich's favorite part is also my favorite part.
Oh,
And
which part's that?
so I suspect, because you read a snippet from the chapter where Father Ambrose basically dresses down Virgil.
Mhm.
This is the scene where Austin is trying to smuggle a nuke up onto the ship, and he's tricked his friend Father Ambrose into agreeing to say a mass on the ship, or at least he thinks he has tricked him. And they've now gotten into the Victorian living room, which I thought that was kind of I don't know. I like that setting. You could set them in a Victorian living room. You don't see a lot of those in space sci-fi stories. But what I loved about that scene was that's where I wanted to give the Catholic perspective, because if people, the answer isn't that the Pilgrims are great Catholics. They're as bad Catholics as everyone you've met in your life, or all the people. Like, that's the thing. They look like space cells of uh, at the get go, but as it goes, you eventually realize no, they're not that great. So in order to discuss that, I really wanted to put those words in Father Ambrose's mouth, and it includes my favorite line from the story. But here's the other thing I love about that chapter. Austin's goal is to get Father Ambrose to get all the way to the alien mothership so he can say a mass, because he smuggled a lectern that is actually a nuclear weapon. And Father Ambrose in the middle of that scene says, for all these reasons, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say the mass. So initially, the first half of it is this tete-a-tete between Virgil and Father Ambrose about the justification for genocide, which I just think is great. But the second half is Austin, who's motivated to kill all the Pilgrims, essentially, for having done the genocide, becoming their attorney, their advocate, so he can betray his friend, Father Ambrose. And so that's like the conversation between Virgil and Father Ambrose. And then the fact that my protagonist has to become the devil's advocate. He has to defend the fact that they did it, even though he doesn't feel that way. He just needs to trick his friend in getting to betray him. And the thing that gets Father, he puts all these reasons, and Father Ambrose is like, they were just following orders. That's ridiculous. Like, that doesn't work. Like, Austin can't outsmart Father Ambrose, but the thing that gets him at the very end was, he says, what do you think is going to happen to Virgil? Don't you think they're going to kill him? Because, he got all the Pilgrims' hopes up. They're going to delete this AI. They're just going to get rid of him as a result of him having gotten everyone's hopes up and then you pulling the plug at the last minute. So Father Ambrose's unwillingness to betray a friend and allow him to die is ultimately what leads to Virgil's death at the end of the day. So it's like a case of extreme projection. So anyways, I love that chapter, and I love that that's where it seemed that your focus was, because I think a lot of people like the climax, which is the actual mass, but I actually love that chapter, which is the previous chapter to that. That's my favorite. And the one final thing I'll say about that is Virgil delivers my favorite line of the novel. You almost got to it in your review, your excerpt, but Father Ambrose goes on, there was debate in the Vatican about whether the Pilgrims are fallen. Well, after we saw what happened in Saudi Arabia, now we can have no doubt. And so Virgil's response is, the Pilgrims are fallen, riddled with sin. That is why we thirst for the sacraments so. And I just feel like that is the core of my book right there. I mean, it's a very Catholic perspective. And Justin Thomas James did the voice for Virgil from the Sound Booth Theater, Jeff Hayes production. And I did have to have him redo that line, and he just nailed it, because I really wanted the pain in Virgil's voice to come across. So when I listened to the audiobook, it's just my favorite. And so I was so glad that you kind of zeroed in on it yourself, Rich.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it does feel like the zenith point, especially with everything with Father Ambrose. To some degree, he feels before that just a little too good, and just his relationship with Virgil, you as the reader on Austin's side feel a little bit outside of it, and that Ambrose is too close to the aliens for that their relationship seems so close so quick, and you just don't know, is he going to take the Catholic side? Is he going to be afraid? What is the nature of this relationship? Is it actually a true friendship? Do they respect each other enough to be honest? And that is the moment, especially with Father Ambrose, laying into him shows that he actually does care. shows that it's a genuine relationship rather than one that we think maybe Austin have. It's like, oh, are they conspiring in the beginning? Why are they so close? It's really what I needed from that character in the first place, of just seeing that he does have his anger, and that there's something that can go too far. So that's
He's
why
not
I
just
enjoyed
Friar
it.
Tuck.
Yeah,
He's like a
exactly.
real. He's a mind. Yeah, and then that was obvious. I mean, it's my first book, so you do worry about falling into tropes too much. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was important for me to make these characters feel real, as much as I could. And so, uh, yeah, I think that that whole interaction is critical to the whole story for me.
Well, also Virgil give it, because there are details that came out before that chapter about how the Pilgrims came to follow um the Catholic faith, but the little details of the Pilgrims have done every type of war, have implemented every type of government, and just hinting really that they have committed genocides of their own people many, many times over. It makes sense why when fallen, like, they already have the classic Catholic guilt. That's true. They before even becoming Catholics, they had this immense guilt for their own
Hmm.
culture and sins, and then seeing like, oh, there actually is a path for forgiveness. Think like it did make a lot of sense to me of like why they would be motivated to go across the galaxy for
Mhm.
this, and why the Eucharist was so important to them. So it's what I enjoyed, that little bit of background history to it.
Yeah, certainly.
Especially not making them just space elves.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out more about the Pilgrim and Pilgrim Society in the follow-on books, because I could tell from your review, you thought that that was a little bit under, there wasn't as much there as you might have wanted. Like one of your questions, and you're not the first one to raise it, is like, wait, so these aliens are like super smart, and they start like playing the Our Father on loudspeaker across cities. Like that seems kind of dumb. And I it's not that that thought didn't occur to me. It wasn't just there as a plot contrivance. It was what we're going to learn as the other book is the different factors. And I can kind of, it's not really a spoiler because you could probably infer it from this first book, but it's like and you said this, they think of humans as ants. They live thousands of years. It's not the year 2000 in the world. It's like the year 8 million, and all the symphonies and sonnets and art and dramas and history. Like they don't they don't think of humans in an impressive way, especially since they've been watching us probably since, prehistoric times. And so you could just imagine an outsider's perspective on our species and watching it. And what's like, how would you feel if the creator of the universe, who you had kind of a deistic opinion, you thought, turned on the switch and walked away, actually revealed themselves to be real or active in creation, and they wanted to incarnate in a particular sapient organism, and it's not you. It's basically your pet weevil at your house that lives for like a few years and blows poop around the cage, and you're like, first
That's
of all,
God's
you
favorite child? Really? Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And you're going like, uh not only, well, maybe you didn't have much guilt about how you acted. Now God is here and it's holding up a mirror to all of your behavior for those many millions of years prior. But on top of it, it's like you might take it as a real rebuke that God, in many ways, it's the Christian story. God chose a lowly carpenter's son in Roman Judea. I thought the Messiah is going to be like the new Alexander the Great. Like, I don't get it. This isn't how it's supposed to work. Well, the aliens, it's kind of a similar thing. Like, you can be humbled and you can be loving, or you can be spiteful and resentful. And I think there's various strains of thought within the pilgrim community. We really just get to see one pilgrim, Virgil, and he's more or less a saint. Like, I wrote a saint, which is kind of frightening because you're like, most people don't want to read saints on the page. But I think the fact that you kind of, Nicholas Kotar had this observation, which I thought was brilliant. He's like, the fact that you made him an AI allowed the reader to just be like, oh, he's programmed to seem like a really good Catholic. So that explains why he's like mega Catholic. And so you get the reader going along to buy it, because if it was just a character who showed up like that, you'd be like, oh, this guy's kind of, I don't like him. He's like Rod and Todd from The Simpsons. Like, it's just, or Ned Flanders. Like, Ned Flanders is funny, but it's not exactly like an inspiring character. But because it's an AI, I use the trope of an AI. In fact, my characters are falling into the trope. Oh yeah, that's an AI. That's where it is. That when there is the twist in the final mass scene, or not the final scene, but that he's actually one of the pilgrims, I've got you along long enough that you could see a saint. So we only know what one pilgrim is like, and it's a saint. That's not necessarily reflective of the entire pilgrim society. And I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to see like maybe some pilgrims, maybe the light touch version of First Contact was prayers on a loudspeaker over the Middle East and major Western cities. Do you want to see what the hard version is? Because maybe a lot of people want the hard version. And so you might think it was a little callous and bad, but perhaps there's alternative theories of how to approach humanity. And some people aren't quite as soft gloves. I mean, these are worms, by the way, worms that the creator of the universe decided to become one and are the only path to our future salvation. Damn it. But they're worms. So maybe we shouldn't be so gentle with a box full of worms.
Why did you end the book particularly?
Is that a good? What do you think of that, Rich? What do you think?
Oh.
I do predict. I am very interested in the second book. Now I was already interested, but to be fair, I liked book one as like it's all wrapped up. Like it can be read as a standalone to me. But that makes me interested. That was the soft touch, and I do like that. That was my initial outgoing. The fact that you are confirming that there's a lot more bitterness to the Pilgrims than the book lets on is very interesting.
Well,
in terms of the sequels, like I just want to, I guess I'm inspired by the original Star Wars trilogy. Like A New Hope was not supposed to have sequels. Lucas thought he was going to get the budget for one sci-fi film. Mm-hmm. You will watch New Hope and it's a complete story. It's just people liked the world enough. They liked enough of what's there that they wanted more. That was always my hope with this book. It's not like I probably was always going to write the trilogy anyway, but what's been very gratifying is people are like, okay, so there's Catholic aliens and like 50 days have elapsed. What happens 10 years later? And I'm like, funny you should ask. There's a lot more we can say about that. And you even pointed out, and this is kind of goes back to the World War Z. There's other perspectives on how the alien arrival might have unfolded. And so not that I think this has like the universe of like the Sun Eater that is like as rich. I don't think I teed that one up, but I just think there's a lot more stories to tell with this exact premise. And that's why I'm excited. I think it'll be a trilogy. It will be a trilogy. I can say that. So I'm working on book 2 and 3 kind of in tandem, and those will be released in due course. Not in 2026, probably in 2027, but hopefully book 3 will come fast on its heels.
How far along are you?
I've more or less scoped it out. I learned a lot about writing in writing the first book. It was kind of like a master's in writing. I actually got a developmental editor as I was writing, which is so critical. I would recommend that to people who have the resources to do it. Yeah. It's kind of like an accountability coach, like a personal trainer, but also someone who could teach you the craft. And so he was invaluable. His name's Kevin Johns. He's the man. So I learned a lot, and I realized I'm an outliner. I like outlining. I think it makes writing it a lot easier. And so my outline is more coming closer to a first draft than so I'm almost done with the outline. Sweet. But then I still have to draft it after that.
Yeah. Sweet. Oh, good.
I'll ask, is Austin's story done, or will we be seeing Austin again in books 2 and 3? Or do you not want to say?
Single POV for the whole trilogy. So it'll be Austin behind his eyes. That's one thing I love about Sun Eater. Especially and this is true for Red Rising. So I think there's kind of like a publishing trend or like a writing trend of almost a reaction to kind of the overladen multi POV type of stories. Like if you have to tell a grand story, you need multiple POVs. It's like, I think there's a place for that, but I just love single POV. I think it can really immerse you, and maybe we just haven't had enough of it recently. So I kind of have a strong opinion. I mean, technically, my book has two POVs because we get Monsignor Innocenti in the prologue, but
True.
that's prologues. Those don't really count. So yeah, no, it'll be Austin, and we'll see where Austin starts 10 years later, and uh, I hope I can make it as interesting. I think the plot's really compelling, and there's a lot more to say about the themes of my book, which you guys also figured out: forgiveness and redemption. There's a lot more to go there. This was literally step one, and it's not to the last page he even begins to entertain the idea of being willing to ask God for forgiveness. But to me, that's the first step on where he starts to get forgiveness in the rest of his lives. When he accepts a higher power, accepts that he needs help. It's almost like an addict hitting rock bottom. He had to hit rock bottom. My book is about him hitting rock bottom and knowing there's a future. So we don't get to see all the hard work on the other side of that, which I sensed you might have wanted to, but I just didn't think it was appropriate for the first book. I think we need to see that over the fullness of time.
Why? So for Austin's story, that's going to be interesting because in this book, he starts off with so many flaws, and you make that critical decision for him to stay with his mom when it's when he thinks is the last day and Armageddon's coming, to make him almost completely irredeemable. But that moment, you kind of pull your reader back in and go, wait a second, all right, there's a hope for him.
There's some hope for this guy. Yeah.
There's hope for him yet.
They're not totally irredeemable.
Thank you so much for that. I read that one. Maybe there is a chance. And then you're going to time jump 10 years. We're going to see Austin in the next book. I don't want to ask you to spoil anything or let us know anything. I'm very curious to see what direction you take with, is Austin just as flawed, or has he grown? Is he quote unquote fixed? Or it's going to be more complicated, I'm sure, but it'll certainly, I know it'll be different than the start of book one, but that'll be fascinating to see what direction you take with Austin having started the book, and keeping the integrity of what he learned from the first book, but also keeping you attached to his character growth in book two. That I'm very excited to see what you do with his character. Yeah.
As far as themes go, the book ended with this one that I thought was really fascinating. There was the question that Austin was asking of why did God not just tell everybody that he's real? Why leave it up to faith? Why leave it up to just give us the free will for it? And Father Ambrose, the one chapter where the bitterness kind of comes through of it was a mercy. It was actually a gift, because if it's no longer faith and it actually is guaranteed, it holds up a mirror to everyone that you no longer have an option to deny it, that your sins are now kind of laid bare. You no longer get to hand wave it away and just like, oh, it's not real. It's not a sin. And so it forces you to confront all of your actions. And now going into book two of it just answers that question of like, all right, given the proof of, hey, guess what? The aliens have literal video proof of Jesus rising from the dead. Bam. Catholics were right all along. Let's wrap it up, boys. Let's go home.
Yeah, it's a theme I'm very interested in. Yeah.
One, I liked how talk about, even given all the proof, there will be people that have other motivations to deny it. But also 10 years down the line, how will faith exactly change when it's like, hey, no, there's video proof of that stuff. It's actually just...
We have it on DVR, actually.
We got it on DVR. Yeah. We watch it every Christmas.
Yeah, we DVR'd it. Yeah, every Christmas. Yeah.
Every Christmas.
And hopefully Easter, too. That would be
Easter. Yeah, that's true.
Hey, maybe they had video of Christmas.
Oh. Yeah, I would imagine they got video of, actually baby Jesus being born. We're just watching the highlight reel.
Yeah, it's just the labor video.
See, this is my favorite one, myrrh. See how he gives myrrh? That's my favorite gift. Just returning characters.
Yeah, myrrh. I love that stuff. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Rich, because it's actually a later chapter. So it's a book about Catholic aliens. I had to have a space church, and the climax had to be a mass. Okay, so
Mm.
that kind of tells you a little bit of the structure there. But so the chapter after the maths is Austin.
Oh,
He just
yes.
killed his friend Virgil, and they're on the Victorian living room. Father Ambrose kind of he lets Austin have it too. He lets Austin be like, dude, you're a problem. Like you need to. And I said that the book is an argument. It's a rebuke to the argument from divine hiddenness. Um, and just quickly, if God was all good, or if God existed, God would be all good. If God is all good, he'd want more people to know him so he could be part of him. Not all people know God. That means God's not good. That means God doesn't exist. Ergo, God doesn't exist. That's basically the argument there. So the fact that there are people who think there's insufficient proof is evidence that God doesn't exist. And that is a derivative of the argument from evil, or the problem of evil. A lot of people have spoken about it, but and there's much better technical rebuttals than mine. But I wanted a narrative rebuttal because often that's how we kind of say things. I have a personal feeling, maybe it's from my own life, that it's actually divine hiddenness that is one of the big stumbling blocks for people. They think that it's really this fantastical idea. Now, I would posit that there actually is good reasons, evidentiary reasons, to conclude that the events that happened in Judea in the year 33 AD did happen. And I think that, you can hold that belief with a certain amount of certainty, the same way you hold that, Julius Caesar invaded Gaul. I don't think that's that big a stretch. I know others people think likewise, but not everyone agrees with me. But that's why I don't think that the video would change very much. Honestly, I think it would have like initial impacts, but I think it's really just the world we live in now. Like Austin isn't convinced by it. So in that chapter, Father Ambrose says God's hiddenness is a mercy, a compassion in disguise. So the working title of this book was The Compassion of Disguise. That's what it was up until the
Mm.
very last minute. And kind of the business side of me said one word's pithier. And these fun play on words where you're like pilgrims, like, pilgrims on the Mayflower, but also pilgrims who travel for religion, diplomats, like things like that is just it just makes more sense. And so one thing I asked my editor, my developmental editor, because he's an atheist, so he has no religion at all, probably a little hostile to it. He I go, you've been following the book, right? And he's like, yeah, obviously, I'm the editor. And I'm like, so you see it from Austin's perspective. When should he become Catholic? And he goes, oh, that's a good question. Like he hadn't thought of it yet. And I'm like, well, when we get to the end of part two, like at the midpoint of the book, when he sees that it's a video, like, should he convert to Christianity at that time? He's like, I don't know. I said, would you? He goes, no. And I'm like, well, why not? It's a video. Like, my book. It's not like a twist that the video is fake. Like, this is the book. Like, would you convert? And he's like, nah. I go, if you were to convert, where would you do it? And he says, oh, when Virgil sacrifices himself. That's what would do it for me.
Mm.
So going back to that argument from love, like it's the evidence is really usually not the operative thing. I know for some people it is, but for 90 something percent of people, it's not. And that's why I think that chapter 7, um, when we get his mother showing him unconditional love. So kind of like Marian love. You might have noticed that she had a pale blue nightgown and
Mhm.
Virgil's head was a pale blue. And when he did see Mary in the church, she had a pale blue eyes and such. So I wanted blue to be like kind of that like open Marian kind of endless infinite love, and the red to be more of like the justice of God. Um, but that's why I think when we get that from Virgil, that kind of love, like that's what moves people. That's what ultimately moves Austin. It wasn't the rational arguments. It wasn't the evidence he saw. It was the displays of sacrifice that people did for him. And so I think that's going to hold true in the next book too. I think that there's going to be a lot of discord in society where unfortunately video proof is just not enough. And yeah, as Father Ambrose says, you go from being a bad Catholic to a kind of open enemy of God. And luckily, this isn't the world we live in. I do not wish for aliens to show up with proof of the resurrection because I think that is a worse world. It's a more hellish world where we're going to be held to a higher standard, and many of us, including myself, will probably be found wanting. And that's the world Austin's going to have to inhabit. And good luck to him. it's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, that is. I'm excited, and knowing that it's a trilogy. Well, you said Austin will be featured 10 years in the future in book 2. Is book 3 going to also be another time jump, or is that too much information at
No,
the
I
time?
think I think again, I'm going to take a page out of Pierce Brown's book.
Okay.
So first, the first novel of Red Rising is very much kind of like a self-contained story, but then we start following. Why is the name escaping me?
Darrow or
Barrow. We
Daryl.
start following Barrow like a number of years after the events of book one, and it's kind of a continuous story from the beginning of book one to the end of the book three of the trilogy. So in the back cover, I kind of cite Red Rising. It's probably more well, it's definitely I think I was inspired by the structure. I think he has great structure. And honestly, I think structure eats style for breakfast. Like I just think that's like a business school term. Strategy eats something for breakfast. I forget what. But I think structure does eat style for breakfast. I think you can get away a lot if you structure your books correctly. And I think
Yep.
Pierce Brown is
Yeah.
a master at structuring the modern novel. So he's definitely like a North Star for me. And it's also just more comfortable for me to write and in kind of the way I organize things in my head. So you expect books 2 and 3 to be a consistent narrative across them.
And I love how you pitched Pilgrims by saying it was a combination of Red Rising and Children of Time, and that stuck out to me too because those are two. Love those books. Absolutely love those books.
Yeah, I mean,
And
spiders you root for in
yeah,
space. I mean, talk about a
exactly.
premise that hits you over the head, and it
Right.
works. He pulls it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you too with the book. Is you said one of your favorite scenes was the not the climax, but the scene right before the climax. Is there a moment that you particularly thought, like, man, I hope this lands for people. I hope it works. Like you were insecure about yourself that you were hoping would come across good to whether it was your developmental editor or the readers.
There's one scene earlier in the book, um, and I was like, I might lose 75% of the readers here. I'm so nervous because in the whole time I'm going, I don't want to be preachy. Like my book is definitely an apologetic. It's clear. I mean, I, you mentioned Austin that you were familiar with the contingency argument and the Kalam cosmological argument. Um, you have to well, from my perspective, most readers aren't familiar with anything. Or to put it more, like I heard a major podcaster. She has millions of subscribers. She was the host of The Biggest Loser, Gillian Andrews, and I just happened to keep a clip of one of her interview shows, and she was talking with uh, I think Victor Davis Hanson, who's a historian, and she's like, "Isn't Jesus just like a myth? Like, weren't didn't the Gospels come out like hundreds and hundreds of years after it happened? And like people think it's a legend." I'm thinking that this isn't really an historical controversy in the historical world, but like regular people, if you ask them, might not even know. Like, ignore the theological elements that Jesus was a historical figure, some guy that was crucified. As far as we know much of history before like video recording, we have quite certitude that there was a guy named Jesus and he was crucified in Roman Judea around a certain time. Like you can debate what the significance of that was, but there's enough evidence to make that claim at the very least. But a lot of people don't even know that there's a historical person named Jesus. And there's a lot of people don't even know that there's proofs or logical proofs for God's existence. So my book's an apologetic. I kind of wanted to, especially in sci-fi, put that on the table. Hey, smart person, like you think you're so smart. Like you don't have to agree with the proofs, but do you know that they exist? Do you know that the historical consensus is this guy existed? Like we can debate everything after that, but let's like if you read most sci-fi, it probably wouldn't even get that stuff right. So there's one scene where the Eucharist is being described. I think you might remember the chapter. Austin goes into the FEMA trailer and he's talking to Father Ambrose, and he's, why would the aliens come here and why would they stay? And I felt I needed to explain what the Eucharist was and
Mm,
why it was so relevant. And that, I mean, talk about like, oh, you're going to explain the transubstantiation in your book? Good luck. Good
yeah,
luck.
yeah.
That
I could
sounds
see
like a
that the
fun way to
difficulty.
keep readers hooked. And so I was so nervous. This happens in about the beginning of part 3, like shortly after the twist of the aliens say they have video. So you've gotten a decent way into the book, but you're not at the real fire part where like Rome gets nuked and there's a giant apocalypse in Saudi Arabia. The real action movie set pieces come a little bit later. So it's like, it's just at that delicate middle part where you can easily put a book down. And so I was nervous the entire publication history about that chapter. I didn't think I could take it out. I thought it was critical. And I actually liked
Yeah.
how the scene turns where Austin is like, wait a sec, that means these aliens aren't going anywhere. And it becomes more about the conflict of like how that's pulling the world apart. But what was really cool is when I was talking to Jeff about it, I'm like, Jeff, well, he actually live records, and he has
Hmm.
on his Discord server, you can follow along. So there was like a dozen people who watched like the production of it, and I would join for a significant portion. Also, just seeing how your book gets turned into an audiobook, like so cool. Like Jeff is just great in so many
It
ways.
was so fun seeing him talk to you and then just go into a voice and then come back. It's like, what the heck is he doing
It's
right now?
insane. He's
Yeah.
so, and he runs that like audio mixer with his keyboard like a piano. Like he's just, but it was cool getting their feedback because they were very positive. Like people were like, this is so cool. This is so cool. This chapter that I was like so sweating bullets about. And so I was on a call with Jeff after the fact. I'm like, Jeff, like, I thought this chapter would just bore everyone to tears. And when you read the book, and he goes, no, dude, it's the lore chapter. I was like, what? It's like in a video game when you learn all the lore about the aliens. Like, this is the lore chapter. This is where you learn all the lore. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, do you think people are going to react to it? He's like, that's how I reacted to it. That's how everyone in the Discord server reacted to it. Yeah, it's going to be fine. So the amount of people who love that chapter as like the lore chapter, when it's just like Catholicism, my alien lore is just Catholicism, which is kind of fun. Is really gratifying. So you were talking about a scene that I was really worried wasn't going to work. It was that chapter.
Got it. I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems like that's been a concern of yours of making sure the reader doesn't set the book down. It's a debut where there was a lot of nerves as a debut author going, man, I need to capture the reader's attention almost constantly because they don't trust me. If they don't know who I am, they don't know I'm going to deliver. So was that always a focus for you? And also, was that why the book was so fast paced and 80,000 words?
Definitely. That
Yeah.
I yeah, I just didn't see it any other way. I mean, let's go back to another comment. You guys, you're talking about my prose. Like my
Yes.
prose is workmanlike. That's how I would describe my prose. It is not something to be marveled at in the Smithsonian Museum. Uh, I'm just not that talented. I'm not a Christopher Rocchio. I mean, that guy is a poet. But I just wanted to put that clear window up and hope people could do it. And it took a lot of work to get there. But I was gratified with the feedback on that front. So sometimes you can win readers over with just great prose. I knew I wasn't necessarily going to be
Mhm.
doing that. But also I had the same again from the business. Like you guys are content creators. I mean, you do thumbnails. You're very cognizant of the funnel, and you probably look at metrics where people stop watching your videos. Like I'm sure it is a factor in how you guys produce. Not that I make YouTube videos, but I'm at least aware enough on how the game is played that I had a very similar outlook with the books. I'm debut. People have many competing things for their attention, and I just wanted to make it so that you'd want to keep paying attention to my thing. And I didn't think of that as a constraint. I think it forced me to tell a better story. It's easy to go on digressions. It's easier to talk about things that aren't as relevant. People like setup and payoff. So make sure everything you set up is ultimately paid off. And that means you have to be careful and judicious about what you put in and what you don't. And I think that often will make your book shorter and tighter rather than just like less.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love the pace of your book. I think you were talking with Nicholas Guitar saying that it felt like an airport thriller, but in a good way. That not as a degrading way, but it reads like a thriller. Yeah, it wouldn't be described as such. Would you agree with that term?
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't know the specifics about the genre of thriller. I think there's a tendency to push, like there is an element of. Oh, I'll tell you, this is kind of a diatribe, but it might
Mm.
illustrate my point. So my wife is from South Africa, and so a lot of like the movies I've seen that are like iconic from the 90s or even 80s, like just never made it into her universe. So
Mhm.
like Top Gun. Like have you guys heard of or seen Top Gun?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, people reference it all the time. She kind of felt like left out. Like people, and then they had Top Gun Maverick come out a few years ago, and people were talking about it again. And she's like, "I need to see this movie," and I'd seen it so many times. I'm like, whatever. So this past summer, I was like, all right, we're going to do this, babe. We're going to watch. And we watched Top Gun and then Top Gun Maverick. And my wife actually, she doesn't watch it all in one sitting. So I had to get used to, like, we'll watch like 50 minutes and then have to hit pause. And that was very hard for my autism in that particular way. But that's what you do with love. So watching Top Gun, I don't know if you guys have seen it recently. Like, it takes a long time in the first act. It is a deliberate movie. Like, your probably memory is them in fighter jets, but they're like not in jets for a significant portion.
No, we rewatched it relatively recently. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then also, we didn't
watch Top Gun Maverick right after. Yeah, like then watch Top Gun Maverick right after.
Oh yeah.
It is quick. It is hitting the beats. It is doing the conflict, the plot, setting things up. And I think that is where storytelling went in those intervening 30 or 40 years, for better or for worse. I think Red Rising is a textbook example of kind of like the modern kind of keep them engaged, tell the story, get rid of the fat. That was certainly what inspired me. And that's definitely the paradigm. Like, it might look dated in 50 years. I'm not sure. As we go in different directions, maybe people take more time. They can have, like you were talking about Count of Monte Cristo in your review. I've never read the original, but like, sounds like that one just kind of went with it.
Well, it goes.
The thing is, it was a story written in a magazine.
It was
weekly.
A soap opera.
Like,
yes.
The structure of it necessitates how it's structured. It almost is the wrong way to read it as like a big book.
Yeah, that thing was written over 2 to 3 years and came out every week, and people would read a snippet of it. So it
would be better to think of it as more of episodes of a TV series, like a long season of television, rather than one cohesive narrative arc that's supposed to be tight. So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I would tell writers now, this is the style of the moment. I think there's a lot. It didn't come here arbitrarily. It was people constantly trying to iterate and make like a better car or faster. You might want to bear that in mind if you write your book. This is the style that's now, I think it has a lot of positive things to say for it. I am not a like maximalist. This is the best thing ever. I think there's a lot of modern elements in Christopher Rocchio's work. Like, there's a reason his chapters just fly, even though he takes a lot of time, and it definitely reads a lot different than like a Red Rising, or definitely my book. Not even close. But I talk to a lot of writers. A lot of people ask me for writing advice, and it sounds like you want to do this artistic thing of like, just write whatever you think works. But
yeah,
I really think it's worth it to pay attention to how modern stories are told. That's not everything that's modern is bad, in a sense. Like, I'm very reactionary myself, but in some ways, like Top Gun versus Top Gun Maverick, I actually think Top Gun Maverick is a better film. It is easier to engage.
Completely agree.
Far better.
Yeah. Like in every way.
Yes. The only thing the original Top Gun has going for it is like the male gaze is also
the volleyball scene.
Yeah. And no, it changes from the volleyball. Wait, is it it's volleyball in both?
No, it's volleyball in the first one. It's beach
football in the second.
Double football.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre. They really jammed in that in.
That is the one thing that Top Gun Maverick did not do better. The volleyball scene in Top Gun is so much better. It's also just way funnier.
Can't top it. That's what my wife said. She's like, is this like a love story between guys? Like, I don't understand. Because when you stop the movie at minute 50, she's like, why should I keep watching this movie? They don't get to like where Goose dies and any of the real drama happens. It's like, we spent 50 minutes and not very much occurred. Anyways, you can just change this interview to MR Leonard Top Gun Maverick review.
100%.
Pilgrims is
no, we need to, because the original Top Gun as well. Tom Cruise is so funny to watch act in the first one. It's so his looks, just the way he looks at the camera or looks at the love interest, he's trying to portray that masculine bravado and just give the look, and he just looks childish. It's so funny. It's so fun.
The lines are just hilarious. Like, I got the need for speed. But okay, the thing is, the line, like, okay, whatever, given in different contexts could totally work. But in the movie,
can say it now and make it sound cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it's so out of context and sounds awkward. It works for maybe a trailer.
It's a great soundbite.
It's a great soundbite, but in the movie, it's weird.
They might have did that for the trailer, actually. They probably said, all right, we need this line so we can advertise. Okay, we're changing the title of this episode. Yes. Yeah, Top Gun, what a...
Pilgrims.
Maverick's awesome. Maverick is my wife's favorite movie ever, and
it's like a textbook example of what an excellent film is. And you don't have to have seen the first one, but if you had, the again, the setup and payoffs, the arcs across them are like, it's way better than it deserves to be. And it's just the pacing and structure is on an excellent. Another thing about the Top Gun original, though, that it did definitely better than Maverick, because in Maverick, we don't care as much about 60-year-old men playing 50-year-old men, who in real life would be staffed by 35-year-old men as fighter jets. I don't know if, that's just how the military works. You're not a pilot at age 57. But the romance in the first one, it's really well done. Both the intercutting and, the way the theme goes down and it comes back up, and everyone can remember that iconic silhouette scene, which is very, not racy by today's standards. It's actually quite tasteful. Maybe it was a little bit racy back then, but it's tasteful by the current operation of the time. Like, I think they did a good male lead, female lead love interest. And I could see why the movie was so popular at that time as a result.
Yeah.
It was just like, having not watched it in a long time, I'm like, oh wow, they really did that romantic subplot like excellently in the first time.
Yeah, did you not like it in the second one, or did you also like it in the second one?
I think in the second one,
well, only young love can exist. The old guy can't get the girl. Come on, man.
There's something about menopausal love, and I use that in both the male and female contexts, that it's nice, but it has a different kind of vibe to it. So I didn't dislike it. I thought it was great, but menopausal. And by the way, Patty Chayefsky, who wrote Network, and he's one of the top writers in Hollywood. My favorite film is Network, and he's the screenwriter for it. He would often allude to male menopause. So that's like the first time I heard that term. So I'm using it for both men and women, basically people in that window of their life that I'm quickly approaching. There's a more of a companionate element to it than there is in, say, the first film, where you're like, oh, these two could couple and form like a happily ever after. In other words, starting a new family and all that jazz. So I liked it in the second one, but I mean, the first one is iconic. No one's talking about the second one. The first one, you can just play the music, ba, 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 ba. That's it. Everyone knows what I'm talking about with just a few beats.
Well, if we don't see Tom Cruise playing Austin, well, that wouldn't make sense. It's much younger. But still, if we don't see Tom Cruise playing somebody in your book series one day, we'll be disappointed equally.
Before I got to Jeff Hayes, I actually did want to I wanted to try to cast a top Hollywood actor. I'm like, how much would this cost? Like, maybe it's a lot of money, but like, maybe it's like a new car amount of money and not like a new mansion amount of money.
Right.
So like, what would Tom Hanks cost? So I reached out to the agency. It's like CAA.
Yeah.
And I started initial correspondence, and they're just like, this is a lost cause. Like, he's not going to read for your book. It doesn't matter how, like, I don't even want to quote you the price. And I was like, okay, I think I need to go in a different direction. So I haven't thought about who would play Austin. I did get to Tom Hanks as the narrator for the book, but Jeff Hayes is way better. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah. Significantly. But okay, Michael, thank you very much for chatting only about Top Gun with us, because this was a great Top Gun Maverick discussion as well. And thank you for shouting out your book to us in the first place, emailing us, having us read it. This was very fun for us to then get to talk to the author after having read the book and talked about the book a lot as well. So I know, Rich, you're equally happy, joyful.
I'm
cheerful.
jazzed. I'm
Yes.
cheerful.
Yeah.
And people listening or watching, if you want to check out Pilgrims, which by this point you have to, you can click the link down below. You can go check out the book. It's fantastic. You could also watch a review of it. We give another pitch there, but by this point, you've been pitched the book. You're gonna go read it. It's fine.
Michael, thank you so much. Anything you wanted to sign off with?
No, I just want to thank you guys again. It was it was really generous of you to take on a debut author. I know you get a ton of inbound. You're probably swamped with books and people asking, and you only have so much time. I know you guys have very full lives in addition to this channel. So I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it does help. It helps me personally, but it does help the other debut authors out there that can kind of get some signal for their book and get some fans and maybe get some new voices into the space. So thanks again. And I'm happy to chat anytime. I clearly have a lot of thoughts on a lot of things. You ever want to tap into that, don't hesitate to let me know.
I guess.
Well, thank you. And it was our pleasure to read it.
See y'all next episode.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.